Okay, my name is Jim Moran, and my display is about the revolvers made by William Tranter. William Tranter was an Englishman based out of Birmingham, England, who began making guns in the late 1840s. Actually made a lot of contract guns for John Adams and Dean Adams and Dean from 1850 to 1853. He helped start the Birmingham Small Arms Trade Company, one of the founders, and continued to manufacture guns until about 1880. He made about 8,000 revolvers under the Adams patent. During this time, he developed a lot of his own patentable ideas, and especially different ways to manufacture the revolvers out of a solid piece of steel. The barrel and the entire frame of the revolver was made from a single piece of steel, and therefore was more robust than competitors like Colt, who moved into the English area in 1853. Might add that Tranters that were made for the Adams can only be determined by taking the grips of the Adams revolvers off and looking for a very small WT stamp on the frame underneath the grip. Other than that, there's no designation or engraving on the revolver related to Tranter. About 1853, Tranter started making his own revolvers. So the first two revolvers in the display up here on the upper left-hand side were both Dean Adams and Dean revolvers. And during this time, Tranter experimented with different approaches. These are actually two reverse rotation revolvers. In other words, the cylinders actually turn in reverse compared to more normal revolvers that are made by everybody else. In 1853, Tranter started making his own guns and included 5 different models, generally speaking, during the time. We're going to go through those quickly here. Over here on the far left is the Tranter first model revolver. It's determined largely by the models are determined by the different types of rams on the revolvers. The first model here had a ram that you would keep in your pocket, and it would just attach to a small peg on the revolver here when you needed it. Okay, the second model ram would attach to a keyed peg, so you could actually rotate the ram and take it off if you wanted to, or you could leave it on the gun and it would still function fine. The third model revolver had an attachment with a screw, and the ram was changed so the ram piece here would pivot so it'd get a better compaction compared to the previous Model 1 and Model 2 rams. The fourth model revolvers, shown here, were both basically double action revolvers, self-cocking revolvers. And as you can, as you can see here, this is a double action here. This one is also a double action revolver, larger bore, 54 bore, about .442 caliber. And then the last revolver on this row is what's called a Tranter Adams Kerr revolver, and they were made with the Kerr loading lever on it instead of the normal Tranter loading levers. Tranters were used during the Civil War. They were appreciated by many of the users and the soldiers because of their unique double trigger setup. Tranter called this the hesitation trigger or hesitating trigger, and that was a trigger that you could pull back the lower level back to rotate the cylinder, and then with a very light touch with the upper trigger up in the trigger guard, you could fire the revolver, release the trigger, and it made it easier for a more accurate shot. The general belief is that Tranters were appreciated by generals and officers of the Confederacy because a lot of the Tranters were sold through New Orleans. Various retailers, one of the main ones during the early war period was Hyde and Goodrich. So up on the upper right-hand side here is a 36 bore, roughly 50 caliber, Hyde and Goodrich sold Tranter with a double trigger arrangement. And if you can't probably see it in the film, but it actually has 7 tally marks carved into the upper part of the barrel right up in here. The other thing about Tranters is, even though it's not well known, they were appreciated by Union officers too. And so the officers, the Confederate officers like Jeb Stuart, and John Morgan, and John Magruder had Tranters, but Union officers, including Don Carlos Buell, and Rosecrans, and even Allen Pinkerton, who was in charge of setting up the intelligence service, later became the Secret Service, all carried Tranters. If you look at this revolver here, this is a third model double trigger Tranter. It's also called export model or treble action. And the reason is the Americans appreciated the ability for a single action capability on a revolver because they're used to Colts. And so you notice that this Tranter here has a spur on the hammer, and the serial was changed so it actually could be used as a single action, a hesitating action, and basically the effective double action. So it gave you 3 alternatives in how it was operated. This gun here was actually the gun owned by General Don Carlos Buell, and you can see in this photo it shows the estate of Don Carlos Buell at his death. And you'll notice in the photo there's 2 Tranters hanging on the wall, .442 caliber and a .380 caliber, and Tranter cases that came with them. This is the .442 caliber Tranter that's hanging on the wall there from the Don Carlos Buell estate. That's kind of a summary of the percussion Tranters. In 1863, William Tranter secured the first patent for a cartridge revolver in the UK, or in England at the time. And that was a patent for a rimfire Tranter. If we come over here, you'll see this is an 1863 rimfire Army. It's a 54 bore, or better known, roughly about a .442 caliber. And it was retailed by John Rigby in Dublin. And one thing Tranter did on all his revolvers he made, he wouldn't put his own name on his revolvers very often at all. He would leave the top strap blank and engrave the names of the retailer that he was selling the revolvers to. Like any good wholesale manufacturer, he was always looking out for his retailers and his distribution system. So all of these Tranters, almost all of them, are actually labeled on the top strap by the retailer who sold the gun. Okay, the next cartridge revolver here is a 1863 sheath trigger #2 revolver made by Tranter. This is a 7-shot rimfire, 32 caliber, and it's gold plated with ivory grips. So this was a very expensive gun at the time. In general, Tranters were expensive, costing many times more than the Colts, but they were regarded as a superior gun to the Colt single actions that were available at the time. Quickly going through the cartridge revolvers, This is what's called a Tranter rimfire house defense revolver. It's made in that period between 1863 and 1868, and it was a .38 caliber and retailed by Tim Conway in Manchester, England. In 1868, Tranter started producing centerfire revolvers. Here is one of the first centerfires. This is roughly a .38 caliber 5-shot centerfire revolver, retailed by E.M. Riley, and it was one of the first centerfires that Tranter made. In this, you might notice this has a very long ejector on it. Okay, we come over here, we'll see another 1868 .45 caliber 5-shot, and this has a different style ejector. This was called a short style or short mushroom style ejector. Okay, and then down here is an 1868 hybrid double trigger centerfire revolver. This is a very rare revolver. This is the only one I've ever seen like this. So it had the double trigger hesitating action combined with the centerfire type frame. Then in 1878, Tranter produced his first revolver that actually was sold under a military contract in England. And it was, at the time, England was fighting a number of wars, and they were running short on revolvers. So this revolver was used in the Zulu Wars, and then also in New Zealand with the Maori wars that were going on at the time with the native New Zealanders. And this was a centerfire revolver. This is a .45 caliber, and it's the only revolver that ever received a military contract from Tranter. This actual revolver was sold initially as a commercial revolver, and then as England discovered they were running out of revolvers, they went on the commercial market and bought the revolver and then had it inspected, and then it was entered into the military. And then the last cartridge revolver designed by William Tranter was the 1879 self-extracting revolver. It has a top break action on it and a self-extractor to remove the empty shells when you open it up. It's about .45 caliber. And once again, this revolver actually has stamped on the bottom of it BNSF, which stood for the Bank of New South Wales in England. In Australia. In New Zealand. Anyways, so this was the very last revolver that Tranter had made. So Tranter was prolific in designs. He had over 20 patents in England at the time, and this is kind of the quick history of his revolvers.